Hello BookTube and welcome to the Literary Buffet. My name is Louis and today we will look at what might be the perfect historical novel. And that is Orhan Pamuk's My Name is Red. I read it over the summer in the French translation. This is the English translation. My reread of it will be in English. But I thought what we could do today would be to look at it from the perspective of what makes it a great historical novel and maybe the perfect historical novel. And so I put together like 8 criteria on which to judge this novel as a historical novel, as a literary historical novel. And so maybe those 8 criteria could also be useful for you when you look at historical novels more generally. I also have a Substack on this, so I'll put the link below and you can have a read at my slightly more elaborate, more detailed little text there. So let's start. What is the first criteria for a great historical novel? And for me, that is an engaging plot. So the plot of My Name is Red is more or less as follows. So I won't put too many spoilers, so it will be just light spoilers for this whole video. But in general, what happens is this. So there's a character named the Uncle. The Uncle has been tasked by the Sultan, who is not named, but from the time it plays, it's probably Murat III. And the Sultan has commissioned the Uncle to create a book with miniatures in the new style, the Western style, so not the classical style that was used in Persia or Turkey. And one of these court painters that is commissioned to work on these miniatures gets assassinated. The nephew of the Uncle, a person that is called the Black in the novel, he's tasked with actually solving the murder, or he helps the Uncle to identify who the murder could be. And at the same time, we also have like a love story that is developing between the Black and then the daughter of the Uncle, and that's a lady called Shekure. So this is roughly the premise of the book. So this is what happens kind of like in the first few chapters. So no big spoilers there. But really, I mean, I think a combination of a murder story, a love story, like you have vibes of other great historical novels like Umberto Eco's The Name of the Rose. But I think these elements, classical elements of other genre fiction, make great ingredients to create an engaging plot. So number two is to have a great technique, a great structure to actually tell this story. And Orhan Pamuk is really fantastic at this. So he operates with multiple POVs. In a previous video, I did highlight that I think multiple POVs are obviously a bit more difficult to pull together, but Orhan Pamuk really manages to do it. He actually also has some kind of like postmodernist techniques that he uses. Actually the first chapter, the first thing that you actually read is written from the perspective of the corpse. So the person that has just been assassinated. And but you also have like things where he breaks, for instance, the fourth wall. So we do have, for instance, perspectives of the assassin who talks to you, the reader, saying like, well, I mean, you will know me as the assassin. And Pamuk really manages to actually pull off these chapters that are written in the assassin's voice, while keeping it obscure until the end who the assassin is, because he also talks in his normal voice in other chapters. So that's really quite good. And that brings me to the third point, and the third point is flawless execution. Pamuk is really a fantastic writer here, so all the characters are really well developed, they're quirky, they're not perfect, each character is flawed, including the two lovebirds. the Black and Shikure. You followed their thought processes, and well, it's not Romeo and Juliet, but it's still a love story, but it's a very humane one. But also you have like a whole like Chekhov's arsenal that is being deployed. So all kinds of elements that are introduced at the beginning that become relevant at the end. So that's really fantastic. And not just Chekhov's guns in the traditional plot sense. Pamuk also introduces Chekhov's guns almost on a metaphorical sense. There's a painter from the past, a Persian painter that everybody admires, called Bizat, who is mentioned several times. And you wonder, like, okay, well, maybe it's just like, painting this world a little bit and then making it more concrete with his references to this Persian painter. But no, it actually also becomes relevant. So really fantastically executed. And that brings me to point number 4. And I mean, we're talking about historical novels. So what do you want from a historical novel? Is of course an immersive world. So you want to live in the world of the court painters of Sultan Murad. And you do that in this novel. So, and not just do you visit the palace, you visit the harem, you visit the site of the painting quarters within the palace, but you also visit the back alleys of Istanbul where the normal people live. You have one character which is kind of like a matchmaker, and with her we kind of like really go from house to house and see like how the poorer people of Istanbul lived. So you really get like this sense of place of Istanbul. Then number 5, and this is where we move from traditional historical fiction, because I think all of these first 4 points could apply to any good historical novel. I think what takes this like a notch up is that it's not standing in itself. It's not just telling a story. It's actually telling a story, but in dialogue with other stories, with other books, with other great literature. And I think this is something that you often see great books do, great literature do, is like they are in dialogue with other great books. In the case of My Name is Red, the great books that it's in dialogue of are especially books that are more from the tradition of the Middle East and Persia. So books that I wouldn't necessarily know, but that are referenced quite frequently. One of them, for instance, is by Nizami Ganjavi, who is a Persian poet that is very famous for a handful of epics that he wrote. And the one that is referenced the most often in Pamuk's novel is this one here, which I actually got after reading Pamuk. And that's Khosrow and Shirin. And it's kind of like a love story between the Emperor Khosrow and Shirin. And to a certain degree, the love story between the Black and between Shikure echoes the love story of Khosrow and Shirin. But there are also other works that are mentioned and referenced. The Shahnameh, the great Persian epic. Of course, like other works like the Quran, the Arabian Nights, Layla and Majnun, which is another love story also from Ganjavi. So you have several works of literature with which this one is communicating. It's not just communicating on a literary spectrum with other works. It is also looking at philosophical themes, and that's point number 6. And so it's a little bit, or you have a little bit the same elements that you have, for instance, in Thomas Mann's fantastic Magic Mountain, where you have philosophical themes that are explored. They are not really resolved, but it's left up to the reader to make a decision or not make a decision. In this case, like one of those topics that is explored in the discussions between the various protagonists, the various court painters, but also the head of the court painters, who is Master Osman, is what is actually art? What is style? Do you need to have an own style as a creator? Should you actually try to do something new, or should you rather pay homage to the old and then try to emulate the great masters of the past? What is more worthwhile? Is it being in the stepstones or stepping into the steps of your predecessors, or is it going in new directions and maybe failing and then maybe creating something that is odious and hated? Is it maybe actually something that goes beyond that? Should you be depicting the real world as in Western painting at the time, so Renaissance style painting, the painting that these court painters are supposed to emulate? Or should you rather strive for what the ancient painters were doing, which was more metaphysical? They were trying to see the world as God was seeing it, which is why they would not actually paint with perspective, which we in the West see as a great development in painting. But here it's argued from those that prefer the Eastern style of painting that actually perspective is flawed, and if you put yourself or try to put yourself into the perspective of God, God sees everything top down and everything at the same level. There is no perspective for God. And so these are things that are explored in this novel, and it's just fascinating, really. But it's not just discussions about art or philosophical discussions like that are explored here. Point number 7 is like this. Point number 7 is it's a work that also speaks to us today and that explores topics that are relevant also today. So they are universal. And in this particular case, so Orhan Pamuk explores a dilemma that was relevant for Turkey at the time where it's playing. So basically, the incipient Renaissance, Turkey almost at its peak, or the Ottoman Empire almost at its peak, but going to be challenged by the West more and more. And here the West is challenging it in painting with this new painting style. But obviously, while Orhan Pamuk was writing this book, and it was published in 1998, Turkey was again facing this same dilemma, a dilemma that Turkey has faced throughout the ages, which is, should it turn towards the West, towards Europe, at the time towards the European Union, or should it turn towards the East? Should it turn towards the rest of the Middle East, the Islamic world? In this case, actually, it's also made reference to the world of China, which obviously Turkey and Istanbul were on the crossroads of trade between China and the West. So what is the role to play for Turkey? And it's actually a question that is still relevant today, of course. Turkey today is still facing the exact same dilemma. Should it face towards the West, or should it face towards the East, towards especially now new emerging powers like China and India? And there's no easy answer for that. But it also goes beyond just East versus West in a geographical sense. Pamuk also explores in this novel this idea of, which I was already mentioning, the past versus the future, the past versus the present, conserving versus innovating. There's one character in the novel, and it's kind of like a preacher, Nusret Hoxha, I think, something like that. A preacher from Anatolia who has come to Istanbul to decry basically the decadence of the capital city, and basically he accrues a group of fanatics that end up playing a role in the novel as well. But at the same time, you also have the innovators. You have the innovators in the we have you kind of like a comic, you would call it today, like a stand-up comic, who features also in the novel from time to time. So that's also a representative of modernity, because via his caricatures, the personas that this comic inhibits in this book, he obviously also proposes like another world, a competing world to the world of the conservative preacher. It's also innovative in that sense because it is in the chapters of the comic where Pamuk also innovates in terms of the narrative. He, for instance, takes or writes certain chapters in the voice of the personas that the comic is emulating here. So, for instance, there's one written from the perspective of a dog, and then there's one it's maybe the most, almost the most iconic one, because it's the most innovative and unexpected one, and not something that you would see in a traditional novel about the Ottoman Empire. And it's actually the one that gives the name to the whole novel. It's a chapter written from the perspective of the color red. And so, yeah, so you have beyond just the discussion of Turkey's position between the East and West, Turkey's position between conserving and innovating, between religion and the arts and comedy, etc. You have this discussion that also transcends Turkey and is relevant for all of us. Each one of us is in this dilemma between the old and the new, the past and the future, and has to make choices in this respect. And then last but not least, number 8, so 5 plus 3. So number 8, the last one. I think all of these things are fine, and all of these things pulled together make a great and fantastic literary historical novel. But point number 8 is you need like a red thread. You need something that pulls all of these elements together, and that really binds that's like a glue for the novel. And in the case here of My Name is Red, this red thread is the whole idea of seeing and not seeing, seeing and being blind. The miniaturists, so these court painters that paint these tiny miniatures. On the one hand, their eyesight is brilliant because it has to be for them to paint these tiny things. But then the consequence of their work is that most of them end up becoming blind towards the end of their lives, because the eyes have been strained to such an extent. And this then, leads to whole discussions about what does it mean to be blind? Is being blind actually maybe also being closer to God, because you're not, you start seeing almost like with your inner eye. So that there are all of those discussions, but it also goes beyond that. It's also about what do you see and what do you want to see as a person? Where do you want to actually turn away? You have some characters that prefer not to see certain things. And last but not least, well, you also have those characters that are unfazed and are willing to actually look into everything, that are, not hiding themselves, not wishing to be perceived. Again, the idea of being perceived in a different way, or in a better light, or in a more fantastical way than they are, or that only care about appearances. And in the end, it's probably what the novel's title alludes to. Red is obviously the most flamboyant of colors. It's the color that wants to be seen. It's the color of passion, but it's also the color of blood and of tragedy. And so what Pamuk calls us to is like, okay, don't close your eyes, open them, and look at it. Look at the world. Look at the world as with all its flaws, with all its positives. So look at the red in the world. So this was my little list of 8 things to look out in a historical novel. I think, as you could judge from my gushing statements about this novel, I really, really love it. I really recommend it. To me, it's really close to perfection as a historical novel. It definitely made me want to read more novels by Pamuk. So I have a collection of them on my shelf somewhere. And I definitely recommend that you read this. So that was it for today. Thanks a lot for listening, and goodbye, BookTube.